That we both said we have changed our ways or our language a little bit. We say things like, I wonder if, and using these phrases because we have heard them so often also from you, Yona, and now it's kind of in our repertoire. And Far said that it's more than instructing. It's
Rather than instructing, we are trying to make them find their own way. They are creating the road actually. We don't tell them you should do that. Let's start from here. They are finding their methods in the lesson. It felt very good because it felt there is democracy in the class rather than saying do something. It's relaxing atmosphere better than the traditional ways. So I didn't feel like oh, what am I going to do, because we are so open and honest to each other in that way. Or sometimes we had some difficulties, but that was democracy, and we vote for something to have our decisions. So it was not difficult for me.
You set a project and then you say maybe we could do it this way or that way, and I consciously now don't think that, or I pretend that I don't know. And what happens then is some of the people in the room, the young people, have different ideas, and then you think, oh, I didn't think of this, and it's much more exciting because it's new every time. Because it's not only your thought, it's somebody else's idea, and that's really exciting. So you're more like facilitating a process. You don't hold all the responsibility because they take it as well, which I found really useful.
This generation wants to add something in the classroom. They want to be heard.
Yeah.
So I think commission model and Mantle of the expert is perfect for this generation Z and for our culture, I think. Our Turkish students want to be heard, and the commission gives them chance.
I think, yeah, I think in particular I've used this letter thing. So I kind of invited them to have a voice through the letter, which is something I learned also through this process. And that gives first an opportunity, like the class I was working with, there's many different backgrounds, to actually talk about that in a normal way rather than, oh, where are you from? Being a foreigner myself, I'm very aware of this. That is really annoying. It's really annoying. And it's really classifying you all the time. So because we talk about this particular project, which is about intercultural, how can we unpack something that's considered very British in an intercultural way, it gives a natural opportunity to talk about. So I can say, oh, I'm German and this is what I've seen, and then other people, it's just, and Mantle gives that. You don't have to force it. It just kind of happens. And then the focus goes wherever it goes, and we go through like everybody is very happy to agree to a set of, like an agreement, because we ask for the agreement. So it's, and this is with children 12, 13 years old, who are considered, not paying attention, or no problem.
The thing that comes to my mind listening to that discussion, I would rather say, because Faria, she said instruction. So it is maybe that we know before and we have our structured plan, and now we instruct and we have our tasks. And the other is the co-constructive learning, which is a learning theory. It says that the students should learn by doing, should learn from each other, peer learning and things like that. And I think what I am doing, and what I am doing even more now, is a kind of scaffolding, a thing between. Because it cannot be kind of co-constructive learning all the times in my classroom. For me, it would be a bit like anarchy, or I don't know. Yeah, I have to give some structures. I have to know things. I want to plan. So if I want to build a scaffold, I have to know some things about my students. That's my thing, how I am doing it, or I'm trying to do it.
Was saying the thing that's changed for her in her teaching is that now she works very much through tasks which give children problems to solve, things to find out. So rather than being in a sort of transmission mode, it's an inquiry mode. They have to find things out. So I think in your planning, you create those tasks, you create the materials that enable the group to investigate and to find things out for themselves. So I think it's great that that's the thing that you're taking with you in your teaching.
Margarita said something really important about time. Yes, the issue of time. That the project changed her perspective on perceiving time in the classroom, so that now she gives time. She constructs classes just like that. That the students have time to think and to make their own decisions, and that she focuses. Not so much, the focus is not on herself, the focus is on the students, their decisions, their ideas, they develop in time, and this time is an important part, or the awareness of time is an important part of their work and of her work. And Hussein said that it's just a beginning for him, but that he took a he focused on the relationships, like between people, that he met many great people, and that he sees the importance of relations, as I understood.
Yeah.
If I understood
Also, I
correctly.
can add some more things. By the way, just 2 or 3 months ago, Fahriye offered me to be involved in the project, so I was very happy to be a part of this project because I have met really wonderful people here. And also, the starting point for me was work in Turkey. I saw that when you give a task or a role to the students, they do their best, and they feel really happy and very willing to succeed something. And I noticed that the magazine that they prepared, really excellent one, and I saw the light in their eyes.
I think it's about, you said something interesting, I thought, because you're working in higher education, you're training teachers, you're training people on master's courses, and so on. And what Isabel felt she'd learned to do and will continue to do is to be more open. And there was one example she gave, I think, when she was working with trainee teachers, I believe, in primary schools. And they were doing something on Easter. And she was setting up a task, I think, to find eggs or something, wasn't it? And she gave her master's students the task of how can we make this work? How can this task work for the other children in the primary school? And how can we be open about it? And how can we tap into what they're interested in through maybe discovering these eggs and finding the meaning of Easter through that sort of task? Is that right?
Yes.
Do you want to add anything? Because I might have missed something out.
Yes,
Do you want to add
and,
something?
among the tasks, there were tasks that worked obviously curriculum topics. So it was mandatory that to incorporate in the learning situation
Yeah.
academic
Yes, yeah.
outcomes. Yes.
So it's like reaching that balance for you, isn't it? You know, you've still got the curriculum to teach,
Yes.
but you want to be open to what people bring to that. And for a teacher, that means you're kind of on a bit more scary ground because it's not predictable. But I think what you said was, it's more rewarding, it's more exciting,
Yes.
nothing's ever the same. So that's something you'd like to hang on to, is that right?
Yes, but it's more challenging because you can have lots of surprises. So, and I think for the young teachers, I don't think they want to risk to work without further experience on teaching. I think for the young teachers, I think they are not so sure about the curriculum issues to let their kids to decide how the class can flow.
Yeah, but they will see you, and you will be an inspiration for that, really.
So,
But it just seems to me we had a lot of us talking about this, and it's about us being vulnerable in the classroom. And if we can't prepare to risk vulnerability, if we can't risk sometimes being vulnerable ourselves, then we're not going to get these wonderful surprises. So it's a leap from us, isn't it, sometimes? And that's hard to make because we've got all these different pressures. But it's wonderful to hear you say that you'd hang on to that because, you know, despite everything, you will still hang on to that, which is great.
I really thought what Heike said was really important about the balance in the classroom. You have to have a balance in the classroom. You've got no choice because there are some things we have to teach the children. Our curriculum says we have to teach them this. And as wonderful as this approach is, with some things that have to be taught, you can't just hope they'll emerge. You know, but I think with this work in particular, I do think it's, you know, I was just looking up there, it's how we question and how we communicate, and it always comes back to that, how the relationships are central, and whether it's the relationship with the client or whoever's commissioning us, our relationship with the children that was mentioned by Faria, or our relationship with our colleagues, and that always comes back to that, yeah, you know, relationships.
Absolutely.
Relationships.
I think
always.
that's absolutely right. And I think relationships change, as Faria was saying.
We sort of agree with each other. So I don't know which one said what, to be honest. But we mentioned about the drama bit, how it is good to have it as a tool to use, and how you can work with it with the students, and how much material you can get from them when you do that. And to me, always come a bit with the relationship that was said before, because they connect to the matter when they are involved in a drama. And I also mentioned a lot about the questioning, like giving them questions back instead of answers, and how we've been doing it a lot, but choosing better words, and especially because we deal a lot with teachers, teaching them how to make better questions, to elaborate better questions for them to ask, and also to help their students to do that. So it's a sort of a passing work that follows on with other people.
And Doris speak. It's in the same way as Roberta and Daniela about drama as a tool that Doris used more than before the project, I think, because it's a way to engage the students. And Doris says that she doesn't apply drama all along the class, but in some moments of the class, and in some classes, and this is a good tool to teach. So I think it's what we spoke.
Yes. That's, yes. I try to make them think positive about learning, and get a better feeling about learning. So, yeah, you want?
I just wanted to add about the drama. We don't use drama an awful lot in school. We use a little bit of drama, but you can get so much from that. So it's not, it's not a performance.
No.
It's just tiny elements of drama, which might be a bit of paper, or it might be a letter, or it might be an email, or it might be a still image, or it might be any of those conventions, but just the small elements. And I think you're absolutely right.
But I think what I've learned during the time I've been on this project, because I've been part of this project, I think what I've learned more than anything, and that's shifted my practice a bit, is this whole idea of the people in the classroom, when you go into the classroom, who they are and what they can bring. I've become more focused on that. Whereas I think there was a point when I thought, I understand Mantle, commission, it's a client, commission's problem, yeah, I could tell. Oh, we could tell, I plan, and I wouldn't even think about the group. I got into that, I thought, I know this really well now. I could do, we can run an animal sanctuary, that'll do, I'll do that. Oh, it's worked with the last group, it'll work with this one. I've done it before, it's been really good. Oh, there's a bit of that attitude in me, you got a bit complacent or something. But I think what this has taught me really is that you can't do that, because you've got to pay attention to who is in the group. I know that should be obvious, shouldn't it really? It should be obvious. But I think when you're in a system for a long time, it becomes less obvious, and you can be in danger of treating people like numbers and machines, because the system kind of, the kind of whole atmosphere of it, the ethos of it, is very much about, accountability and assessment and you can get into that, especially in the secondary school level anyway, but you can get into that. And you just start thinking, well, I can use this. You almost become part of that machine. So I think, obviously, through writing the book with Brian and being part of this, it's made me think about who these people are, which is why when I spoke to Doris and Heike, I wanted to know the children's, where they were, what their lives, not personal things about them or nothing, but, what's likely to have been their experiences of school. Are they likely to have been new? Are they likely to have been lost? So that was the idea of being lost. That's where that came from. Does that make sense? Because they will all have understood sometime in their life what it was like to be lost. And so I'm thinking more about starting with the children and the group and taking it from there, if that makes sense. And in terms of drama as well, I think we talked about we use bits of drama, we don't use bits of drama. And it's not just the drama that's all singing and dancing and performing. It's kind of, I think the idea of framing the point of view. Like, what if we were people who ran a place for people who were lost? What if we those people? That doesn't mean somebody has to change the way they speak or act. It just means they have a lens through which they see that work. Does that make sense? So we can look in a classroom like we're not doing any drama. But as Dorothy often said, there's drama in the head, and you see with your drama eyes. And it doesn't mean anybody else has to see it, but you see it. And that brings me to the other thing, which I'm interested in more now, is being inside the drama or outside the drama. How often, do we learn more when we get inside it with the children and become with them? Or do we learn more when we're outside it looking in? Because our system in the UK anyway is very much about being on the outside looking in when we come to inspect. I was talking to my daughter the other day and she's had experiences of, deep dives, they call them now, and practice inspections. And people come and sit like, what seems like miles away from the children. Do you know what I mean? And you think her experience inside it with the children was very different to people sitting outside looking in. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's just an interesting thing for us to be thinking about as well in our work. How often do we get in, and how often are we outside? And maybe it's useful to do both, at least get inside as well, because otherwise you don't have that feeling of what it's like if you're not in it with them. You don't know what they're experiencing. So I'm quite interested in that. So I've learned a lot, as you can tell, but I've talked about it. Sorry, I've gone on.
Just on the drama points, there's the obvious sort of drama episodes that you can include, but in Mantle, it's very much about let's talk as if we are running a museum or whatever it is, and that is a drama shift. And I think it's about shifting the way people interact in the classroom, the way the teacher talks and the way the students talk together. That is a shift that I think Dorothy wanted to achieve, the way children and teachers interact and work together. And I think this also applies in the commission model. So I talked on the video that I did for Daniela and the multiplier event about how with the Hexham Hospital Garden Commission, Dorothy wanted to have a sign on the door saying Hexham Hospital Garden Commission meeting, and she wanted that put up every time. She wanted to have a signing in sheet that people, when they came into the room to work together, they signed the sheet. There would be a notice by the door which said the issue of the meeting. And I think that is a shift. You may not call it drama, but it is a shift. Again, we are thinking in terms of a certain frame and point of view as the commissioners. What have I learned? Well, I suppose during lockdown I started this Facebook group, which I just did because one of the things that Erasmus want you to do is to raise awareness of what you're doing. And I didn't expect it to have the impact that it's had and connected us with people in India, in Singapore, in Turkey and all around the world. And doing those posts where I'm taking little sound bites of what Dorothy said, I think probably doing the Facebook group I'm learning more than anybody else, anybody reading the posts. I'm learning from doing it because I'm processing and thinking about those things all the time. So, yes, I feel like all the time I'm being mentored by Dorothy, even though she's dead 11 years ago. I feel like I'm being mentored by her. And one of the things I'm thinking about at the moment, this thing about being open and being in the classroom, being open with the children. Because I think a lot of teachers have in their heads what they need to achieve rather than being open to what the children are bringing and what they need. And I mean, Dorothy said in an interview I read recently, she said something, well, I've never felt fear in the classroom because I just want to be with those children and understand what is happening with them. So I think that's something that certainly at the moment I'm thinking about and learning.
The big problem of the commission model and Mantle for me, it's because there is a problem, is that it's time. We need time to do these things, to apply commission or Mantle. I think we can do little Mantle, little interventions with Mantle and little interventions with commission, but we must know very well what we are doing. For me, when I apply commission model or Mantle, I need to do step by step all the steps that we learn here, and we need much some hours, and the educative system in Portugal, it's difficult to apply this because in Portugal, and I think in the other countries too, but in Portugal, it's all very disciplinary, and with 1 hour for this, 1 hour for that, 1 hour for that, and it's too difficult in 1 hour, less than 1 hour, to do Mantle or commission. For me, this is a problem.
Teachers say they haven't got enough time. And she did say, she wasn't being arrogant. She just said I would ask them what they're doing with their time. And she wasn't being arrogant. She just wanted to really know what they were doing with their time. Really what was in that curriculum that had to take that time, So that was an interesting observation she was making. But I also think you're right. And I think, you've got to cut your cloth according to your means, as they say. You've got to use the time you've got. And maybe in the circumstances you're in, you need to really have your givens, as it were, the things that are, this is definitely part of our commission, this is, you have, and I think it probably would make a demand on you creating materials, maybe as well, with lots of layers on it. So a lot of work would come from you, but then I think you could decide, what is it they're going to decide on? What are the crucial 1 or 2 things that they're going to decide on? That these are all givens as part of it. So I think it is a matter of, focusing on it, isn't it, really? Yeah.
When they are faced with Mantle or commission model, they will say, we don't have time for that because there's so many things, so many pressures on us, so much to cover. I have my own thoughts about that, but I don't know, Richard, how do you see it? Because you've got teachers under pressure to cover a lot of things. So how do you see it?
There are some things that we have to do and some things we have to teach in a certain way. Phonics, some reading, some of mathematics. But that means in the rest of the curriculum, we feel we should be really creative. So rather than a didactic approach to teaching, we should do something that's more creative in that time, which is why we'll use Mantle. So for history, for geography, for art, for science, for design technology, those subjects we'll use Mantle as an approach, and then we can bring in writing, and we can bring in obviously reading. The difference, learning to read, reading to learn. So a lot of our reading to learn is through Mantle as well. So I think we just have to think carefully how we set out our timetable and do what you can. And I think I think it's gone down from about 65% to about 45% of our timetable would be Mantle now. but our teachers still want to do it.
Well, I don't know if it's quite the same now, but I remember maybe 15 years ago, there was a lot of, in English schools, you had Ofsted inspectors saying, you've got to keep moving fast. Everything's got to go fast. You should change the activity that children are doing every 10 minutes. You've got to go fast, 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 keep them busy. But the problem to me is that then you cover a lot, but it's all on the surface, and they forget it. 2 weeks later, they've forgotten it. Whereas I think what you do with Mantle and commission work and all this work is it goes into what Dorothy called deep memory. 2 years later, they remember it. And they remember it because they've engaged in it in a different way. That's sort of my argument anyway. That in fact, that sort of, it may look like it's taking longer to do this, but it works because it goes into that deep memory. And you achieve more in the end, I would say.
I think this research that says from cognitive scientists currently, so again, Dorothy's ahead of her time, that children are more likely to remember, or we are more likely to remember things when they're centered around a narrative. So I think I can remember what happens in Peaky Blinders, whereas I can't necessarily remember what was on the news yesterday. So I think there's a lot of truth in that.
I mean, I don't think the Dorothy's approach is like a strategy, it's a whole pedagogy. And it's about that change. And in Dorothy's class yesterday, there was a culture, in my view, anyway, my feeling about it, was that it was a family. Those young children, those children were actually helping each other. Nobody had to say to them, nobody had to say, can you translate for this boy? Or they were doing it, they were turning to each other. So Doris has successfully sort of built up this culture of family in her classroom. And I think it is about that, really. It is about how do we, and also how that affects, how a culture can affect not just what children know, but what children can become. And I felt yesterday they were quite resourceful, quite independent, quite sort of taking initiative. Really, quite amazing when you think all the adults they had in the room. They were very proactive in their learning. So I believe myself that this pedagogy does shift not just what they know but what they become. And when I go to Richard's school, which I do quite frequently as a governor, and I've written about this for Claire Armstrong Mills's forthcoming book, which you might be interested in, on Rolling Roll. And she asked me to write something about the school, and she wanted to know what impact this Mantle was having and what. And I was saying, well, when I go to the school, it's the children who show me around. It's the children who ask me questions. It's the children who respond to my questions. Mm-hmm. It's the children, and I'm thinking, now, I've taken that for granted a little bit because going to Woodrow, and I don't go to that many schools now. But if you go to other schools, that's not the norm. It is not. So it is kind of. That's why I think it's so significant, this work, in a way. It is about curriculum. It is about teaching this, that, the other. But it's what those people become. Which is why we wrote the humanising education book, really, because we really felt that was true. And I hate mentioning the book, of course, but I have to mention the book. And that was like a long-term project I worked with young people who were called people who were not in education and training. They were labelled before they walked through the door. So we were following that when they built on a commission, what shifted for them.